Yuna Huan had always considered herself a realist. At 32, she had built a successful career as an attorney in one of Seoul's largest law firms, owned her own apartment in the prestigious Gangnam district, and had a clear idea of what she wanted from life. Love held only a modest place in her plans, somewhere between buying a new car and taking a vacation in the Maldives. She didn't believe in fairy tales about princes on white horses and thought that real relationships were built on mutual respect, shared interests, and financial stability. So when, 3 months ago, in the middle of spring, she met Min Soo Ryu in a bookstore on Garosagil, her first thought was, too good to be true. Tall, with pleasant features and a charming smile, he was standing in the classics section, flipping through a volume of Kafka. When their eyes met, he blushed and dropped the book. "Sorry," he muttered, bending down to pick it up. Yuna reached for the book at the same time, and their hands brushed. She pulled her hand back quickly, feeling a strange warmth from that accidental touch. "Do you like Kafka?" he asked as he straightened up. "I'd say I respect him more than I like him," she admitted. "His works are too dark for my taste." Min Soo laughed, a light, genuine laugh. "Then what do you prefer?" That was how their story began. They spent the rest of the evening in a nearby cafe, talking until late at night, about books, movies, and their life priorities. Min Soo told her he worked as a project management consultant, often traveling around the country to help companies optimize their business processes. He was well-read, witty, and an attentive listener. When Yuna mentioned that she had recently won a difficult court case, his face lit up with genuine pride for her, even though they had known each other for only a few hours. "You're incredible," he said then. "I feel like I could talk to you forever." In the following weeks, they met every day. Min Soo would show up outside her office building in the mornings with coffee and croissants, send long messages when she worked late, and give her books with touching notes written inside. He was attentive but not intrusive, romantic but never cloying. Yuna felt her rational defenses crumble, one by one. A month after they met, on a warm May evening, Min Soo proposed. They were walking along the Han River, the sunset painting the water in golden pink hues. He dropped to one knee right there on the riverside, took out a small velvet box, and said, "Yuna, I know we haven't known each other long. But I've never been so sure of anything in my life. You are the woman of my dreams. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding your hand. Will you marry me?" The ring was simple, a thin gold band with a small diamond, but Yuna didn't care. She looked into his warm brown eyes and saw a sincerity that couldn't be faked. "Yes," she whispered, tears of joy rolling down her cheeks. The wedding happened quickly, just a month after the proposal. Yuna insisted on a modest ceremony in a small restaurant, inviting only her closest friends and colleagues. She never met Min Soo's parents. He explained that they had died in a car accident a few years earlier and that he had no other family. The story filled Yuna with compassion and a desire to be the family he had lost. On their wedding day, at the end of June, Yuna wore a simple cream-colored dress and held a bouquet of white peonies. Min Soo looked impeccable in a dark suit. When they exchanged vows, his voice trembled with emotion. "I promise to love you, protect you, and always be honest with you," he said, sliding the wedding ring onto her finger. Yuna believed every word. After the wedding, they decided to live in her apartment. It was larger and closer to the city center. Min Soo moved his things from a rented room in a student neighborhood, 2 suitcases of clothes, a laptop, and a few boxes of books and documents. "I don't have much," he said apologetically. "I've been moving around for work these past few years, so I've gotten used to living light." Yuna smiled and hugged him. "Now this is your home." "Our home." The first weeks of their married life felt like a honeymoon that never ended. Min Soo made breakfast when Yuna rushed to work, left sweet notes on the fridge, massaged her shoulders after long days in court. In the evenings, they watched movies together, discussed books, and made plans for the future. "Maybe next year we can get a dog?" Yuna said dreamily, lying with her head on his shoulder. "Definitely," Min Soo agreed, kissing the top of her head. And we should go to Europe too. I've always wanted to show you Prague. But there were oddities, little things Yuna tried not to notice. Min-soo often went on business trips, sometimes for 3 or 4 days at a time. He explained that it was part of his job. Consultants had to be on site with clients. When Yuna suggested meeting for lunch on days he said he was working in Seoul, he always had a reason to decline: an important meeting, a trip out of town, urgent issues that needed solving. She also noticed that he never left his phone unattended. He took it with him even to the shower, and if a call came while he was busy, his face would tighten with tension. When she asked about it once, he just shrugged. Clients call at any hour. I have to be available 24/7. Yuna nodded. She understood. In her own legal practice, work often blurred the line between personal and professional life. But everything changed one night, exactly 2 months after the wedding. August was hot and humid. That Tuesday, Yuna stayed late at the office, working until 10:30, preparing documents for a court hearing scheduled for the next day. The case was complicated, a family inheritance dispute spanning 3 generations, each with their own claims. Yuna represented the youngest grandson, who had been unfairly cut out of the family business. When she finally packed her papers into her briefcase and called a taxi, the city outside her office windows was deep in darkness. Seoul shimmered with lights, but all Yuna felt was exhaustion seeping into every cell of her body. She had been sleeping only 4 or 5 hours a night for days, and it was beginning to take its toll. In the taxi, she rested her head against the window and closed her eyes. Min-soo was supposed to return from Busan that evening, where he'd been consulting for a shipbuilding company. They hadn't seen each other for 3 days, and Yuna missed him more than she wanted to admit. She just wanted to lie next to him, feel the warmth of his embrace, and forget about work, if only for a few hours. When the taxi stopped in front of her building, it was nearly midnight. Yuna paid the driver, took out her keys, and rode the elevator to the 9th floor. The hallway was quiet, her neighbors were asleep. She unlocked the door to her apartment and immediately felt that something was off. Normally, Min-soo left the light on in the hallway if he knew she'd be home late. But now, the apartment was in total darkness. Min-soo? She called, flicking on the light switch. No answer. Yuna kicked off her shoes and walked into the living room. Empty. His laptop, usually on the coffee table, was gone. She moved through the apartment, turning on lights as she went. Her heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from growing confusion. In the bedroom, on the bed, she saw a white sheet of paper. Even before she stepped closer, Yuna knew it was a note. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The handwriting was familiar, neat, slightly slanted. Just 2 lines: "Don't look for me. I took all your money, but I left you a surprise in the closet." Yuna read the note 3 times, but the words refused to sink in. Was this some kind of joke? A stupid, tasteless prank? But Min-soo had never joked like that. She rushed to the wardrobe and threw the doors open. His things were gone: no suits, no shirts, no jeans. Empty. As if he had never lived there at all. At the bottom of the closet lay a small cardboard box. Yuna crouched down and opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a passport. She flipped it open and froze. The photograph showed a man in his 40s with rough features, a short haircut, and a scar on his left cheek. But the name printed inside was Ryu Min-soo. The date of birth matched exactly the one her husband had told her. What the? Yuna kept digging through the box. There was another photograph, this time of Min-soo, her Min-soo, with his arm around an unfamiliar middle-aged woman in front of some building. The woman smiled into the camera, pressed close to him. In the background, a sign in Chinese was visible. Then came something even worse, a marriage certificate dated 2 years earlier. Groom's name, Ryu Min-soo. Bride's name, Seo Hee-ho. Place of registration, Incheon. Yuna dropped the document, the room spinning around her. Her stomach twisted painfully, and she barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting. When the wave of nausea passed, she splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection in the mirror, pale skin, dilated pupils, trembling lips. She looked like a ghost of herself. "Calm down," she told herself. "You're a lawyer. You know how to analyze facts. Figure out what's going on." She returned to the bedroom, gathered all the documents from the box, and spread them out on the bed. Then she opened her laptop and logged into her banking app. What she saw made her go numb. The balance on her savings account, 35 million won, her entire savings from 8 years of work, showed zero. The last transaction had been made at 4:40 p.m. That very day, a transfer to an account number she didn't recognize. Her checking account was also empty. The credit card had been blocked for exceeding its limit. Someone had withdrawn the maximum amount in cash. 35 million won. Almost 3 years of her salary. Yuna closed the laptop and looked at the wedding ring on her hand. It now seemed like a mockery, a hollow symbol of deceit. She didn't cry. The tears would come later, once the shock wore off. Right now, something else was taking root in her chest, a cold, burning determination. If Min-soo thought she would just accept this and move on, he was gravely mistaken. Yuna Hwan was one of the best lawyers at her firm, not because she gave up easily, but because she knew how to uncover the truth, even when all the evidence pointed elsewhere. And she would find him. She would find Min-soo and make him pay for what he had done. The next morning, Yuna arrived at the office at 8, though she had barely slept 2 hours. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but she covered them carefully with concealer and put on her professional mask of calm composure. No one could suspect what had happened the night before. The court hearing went perfectly. Yuna delivered an impeccable performance despite her exhaustion and inner turmoil. The judge granted most of her client's claims, and the young man she represented broke into tears of joy right there in the courtroom. Her colleagues congratulated her, patted her on the back, and invited her to celebrate the victory at a bar after work. Yuna declined, citing poor health, and locked herself in her office instead. She had to act quickly before the trail went cold. The first thing she did was call the police and file a fraud report. The duty officer listened to her story and promised to start an investigation, but his voice was indifferent. Clearly, they dealt with plenty of such cases. "Are you sure your husband isn't coming back?" he asked. "Maybe you just had a fight." "He stole 35 million won from my account," Yuna replied coldly. "That's not a fight." "All right, we'll look into it. But you should understand, if he had legal access to your accounts, I understand perfectly," she cut him off. "Just do your job." But she knew the police wouldn't move fast. She needed to act on her own. Yuna opened her laptop and began systematically checking every piece of information Min-soo had ever told her. The company where he supposedly worked as a consultant did exist. She found its website easily. But when she called the office and asked to speak with Ryu Min-soo, the secretary replied that no such employee had ever worked there. Maybe he was a contractor. Yuna pressed. "I've checked all our databases, including freelance consultants for the past 5 years. No one by that name." Min-soo's mobile number was disconnected. His email bounced back. His social media profiles were gone, deleted or deactivated. Yuna leaned back in her chair, despair rising in her chest. He had vanished, as if he had never existed. But no, he had existed. She touched the wedding ring still on her finger. Their marriage certificate lay in the dresser drawer at home. The wedding photos were still on her phone. Then it hit her, the passport. That strange passport with someone else's face but her husband's name. She rushed home by taxi, burst into the apartment, and snatched the document from the box. The passport series and number were clearly printed, enough to start a real investigation. Yuna had connections in various government offices, years of legal practice had earned her favors, and some people were willing to return them. One of her former clients worked at the Immigration Service. Lee Dong-hwan was a short man in his 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. 3 years earlier, Yuna had helped him win a wrongful termination case, and they had occasionally kept in touch since. Yuna, what a surprise, he greeted her when she came to his office the next day. What brings you here? She handed him a copy of the passport. I need information on this person. Everything you can find. Lee Dong-hwan frowned as he examined the document. Is this serious? Very serious. He nodded without another question. Give me a couple of days. The waiting was torture. Yuna tried to focus on work, but her mind kept circling back to Min-soo. Who was he really? Why had he married her? Just for the money? But 35 million won, while a large sum for an ordinary person, wasn't enough to justify such an elaborate scam, complete with a fake wedding. On Thursday evening, Lee Dong-hwan called her. Yuna, come over. What I found, you'll want to see for yourself. An hour later, she was sitting in his office as he spread a stack of printed documents before her. Ryu Min-soo, 42, he began. Born in Incheon. This passport is real, it belongs to him. But here's the interesting part, he has a criminal record. Twice convicted of fraud. The first time at 28, a suspended sentence for conning an elderly woman. The second at 35, 3 years in prison for running a financial pyramid scheme. Yuna listened, feeling the blood in her veins turn cold. Released 4 years ago, Lee Dong-hwan continued. Since then, he hasn't held any official job. But there's something else. He placed another document in front of her. A marriage certificate, registered 2 years ago in Incheon. The wife, Ho So-hee, 38, owner of a small cosmetics shop. I know about that marriage, Yuna said quietly. I found the certificate in the box he left behind. But that's not all, Lee Dong-hwan pulled out a third document. There's another marriage, registered a year ago in Daejeon. The wife, Yoon Mi-ra, 30, a nurse. Yuna felt the room sway before her eyes. 3 wives, she whispered. He has 3 wives at the same time? Looks like it. And all 3 marriage certificates list the same name and passport number. He didn't even bother to hide his identity that carefully. I suppose he counted on you not checking. Yuna tried to process the information. So her marriage had been the third. Or maybe not even the third, who knew how many more women he had deceived? I need the contacts of these women, she said firmly. Addresses, phone numbers, everything you can find. Yuna, this could be dangerous, Lee Dong-hwan warned. If this man is a professional con artist, I'll be careful, Yuna cut him off. But I can't just sit and wait for the police to find him. If he disappeared, it means he had a plan. Maybe these women know something that could help track him down. Lee Dong-hwan sighed and nodded. All right. Give me 1 more day. On Saturday morning, Yuna was on a bus to Incheon. She had the address of Ho So-hee, the woman who had married Min-soo 2 years ago. Lee Dong-hwan had warned her that the shop So-hee once owned had closed 6 months earlier, but according to the latest records, she still lived at the same address. The trip took about an hour. Yuna stared out the window, watching as Seoul's cityscape gave way to suburbs, then to the industrial outskirts of Incheon. Her hands clutched the handbag tightly. Inside was a folder with copies of all the documents she'd gathered. The address led her to an old residential area with low, gray apartment buildings. Yuna climbed to the 3rd floor and rang the bell of apartment 302. No one answered for a long time. She was about to leave when the door opened a crack, held by a chain. A pale woman's face appeared in the gap, eyes sunken and wary. Yes? The woman's voice was hoarse and guarded. Ho So-hee? Yuna asked. Who are you? My name is Yuna Hwan. I need to talk to you about Ryu Min-soo. The reaction was immediate. The woman's face twisted, her eyes filling with tears. Go away, she hissed. I don't want to hear anything about him. Please, wait. Yuna quickly pulled her marriage certificate from her bag. I'm his wife. Or rather, I was. He deceived me too. So he froze, staring at the document. Then she slowly unlatched the chain and opened the door. She looked much older than 38, thin, with dull hair tied in a messy ponytail, wearing faded home clothes. The apartment behind her was small and dim, curtains drawn, clutter everywhere. Come in, so he said wearily. They sat on a worn-out couch in the living room. So he offered tea, but Yuna declined. The silence stretched until so he finally spoke. When did you marry him? 2 months ago. At the end of June. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. So I'm no longer his most recent victim. We married 2 years ago, in September. He came to my shop, buying face cream, supposedly for his sister. We started talking. He was so charming, so attentive. Said he liked the scent of flowers in my store, that he felt calm just being near me. Yuna listened, feeling a painful sense of recognition. The story was too familiar. We dated for 3 months, so he went on, staring into the distance. Then he proposed. I was so happy. I was 36 and had started to think I'd never have a family. And then, this wonderful man who loved me. She fell silent, lips trembling. What did he do? Yuna asked softly. After the wedding, he moved in with me. Said he worked as a consultant, often went on business trips. I trusted him. 6 months later, he told me about a business opportunity. A client was opening a restaurant and looking for investors. He promised the investment would pay back with interest within a year. Yuna already knew how this story would end. I gave him all my savings, so he said, her voice shaking. 20 million won. I'd been saving that money for 15 years to expand my store. And then he asked me to help with a loan. Said the business registration required additional capital, but he had bad credit. He asked me to take the loan in my name. And you did, Yuna said quietly, not a question. 30 million won, so he nodded. I trusted him. He was my husband. How could I refuse? When did he disappear? A year ago, in August. I came home from work, the apartment was empty. A note on the table, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. That's it. No explanation, no money. His phone was disconnected. I couldn't pay the loan, had to close the store and sell the equipment. But even that wasn't enough. Tears streamed down her face. I still owe the bank 16 million won. Creditors call every day. I work at a supermarket checkout now, everything I earn goes toward payments. I lost everything because of him. Everything. Yuna felt a burning anger toward Min Soo. That man had destroyed another person's life without even looking back. So she said gently, there's another woman. A third one. Yoonmi Ra from Taejeon. He married her a year ago. So he looked up, her eyes filled with pain. So while I was working myself to death trying to pay off his debts, he'd already found another victim? It seems so. And I was the fourth. Though who knows, maybe there are more of us. A heavy silence fell between them. What do you want from me? So he finally asked. I want to find him, Yuna said firmly. And I want him to answer for what he's done. Not just to me, but to you, to all of us. Will you help me? So he looked at her for a long time, and Yuna saw despair wrestling with a flicker of fragile hope in her eyes. If there's even the slightest chance to get my money back. She whispered. Yes. Yes, I'll help. Then we need to talk to me Ra, Yuna said. Together, we'll have more strength. She took out her phone and dialed the number Lee Dong-hwan had given her. Yoonmi Ra agreed to meet them that same day. She lived in Taejeon, and they had to take the express train there. On the way, so he told her about her life before meeting Min Soo, how she had opened her shop, putting all her energy and dreams into it, how happy she'd been with her first customers, how proud she was to have built a business with her own hands. I thought I had finally become truly happy, she said quietly, gazing out the window at the passing scenery. I had someone I loved, and work that brought in an income. And now I have nothing. Yuna said nothing. Words of comfort felt hollow and false. Mira met them at the station exit. Yuna recognized her instantly, a young woman around 30, with long dark hair and a gentle face. But what struck her most was something else. Mira was pregnant. Very pregnant, judging by her rounded belly, 7, maybe 8 months along. They went to a small cafe nearby and ordered coffee. Mira asked for juice and slowly sat down, resting her hand on her stomach. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Yuna began. I know how hard this must be. You said on the phone that you're also one of Min-Soo's victims, Mira replied in a calm but tense voice. Tell me your story. Yuna told her everything, from the first meeting in the bookstore to the disappearance of the money and the discovery of the documents in the closet. Then he shared her story. Mira listened in silence, her face growing paler with every detail. I met him a year ago, she began when the others finished. At the hospital. I'm a nurse in the cardiology department. He came to visit his uncle, or so he said, who'd been admitted with a heart attack. We started talking in the hallway. He seemed so anxious, so worried about his uncle. I tried to calm him down, explained that the surgery had gone well. She took a sip of juice before continuing. Then he started coming every day. Brought me coffee, thanked me for taking care of his uncle. When the patient was discharged, Min-Soo asked for my phone number. Said he wanted to take me to dinner to thank me. I agreed. And you started dating, so he said softly. Yes. He was incredibly charming. Told me he'd never met a woman as kind and caring as I was. That I was special. 4 months later, we got married. It was in March of last year. Yuna quickly did the math. That meant when Min-Soo married Mira, he was still married to So-hee. Bigamy turned into trigamy, and now even quadrigamy. I got pregnant almost right after the wedding, Mira went on, stroking her belly. We were both so happy. Min-Soo said he'd always dreamed of having a family, that we would build the perfect home for our child. Her voice trembled. 3 months ago, he told me his company was opening a branch in Seoul and that he had to move there for 6 months. I couldn't go with him. The doctors didn't allow long trips because of pregnancy complications. We agreed that he'd come home every weekend. But he didn't, Yuna said quietly. He did for the first month. Then he started making excuses, important meetings, urgent projects. And then Mira swallowed hard. 2 months ago, he asked me for money. Said his company was delaying salaries, and he needed to rent an apartment in Seoul and pay for some documents. I gave him everything we had in our account, 10 million won. That was our savings for the childbirth and the baby's first months. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. 3 weeks ago, he stopped answering my calls. I went to Seoul to the address he gave me. It was a construction site. No apartment. I tried to find his company. It doesn't exist. I went to the police. They said they'd look into it, but it's been 3 weeks and nothing has happened. She looked down at her belly. I'm due in a month. I have no money for the delivery. I had to take a hospital loan. My parents refused to help. They were against our marriage from the start. Said Min-Soo wasn't right for me. They were right. Yuna reached out and gently covered Mira's hand with her own. We'll find him, she said firmly. And he'll return your money. Every last one. How? Mira's voice broke with despair. He's a professional. He knows how to disappear. But now there are 3 of us, so he interjected. And we have information, documents, photos, dates. We can reconstruct his pattern, understand how he operates. Yuna took out her laptop and opened a file she'd prepared the night before. Let's put together everything we know. Every detail, every word he said. People he mentioned, places he went. Everything. For the next 3 hours, they compared their stories. It turned out that Min Su had used similar tactics with each of them. First he gained their trust, then married them, and finally extracted money under different pretexts. But there were differences too. With So-hee, he posed as a business consultant and took her money under the guise of investments. With Mi-ra, he claimed to work for a large corporation and asked for money for housing. With Yuna, he never asked for money directly, he simply gained access to her accounts after marriage and emptied them when he decided to vanish. It seems he refined his methods with every new victim, Yuna said thoughtfully. Became more careful, more sophisticated. Or just bolder, so he said grimly. There's one odd thing, Mi-ra said suddenly. Remember how I told you he was visiting his uncle in the hospital? I checked later, there was no such patient. He lied about his uncle just to have a reason to come there. So he chooses his victims deliberately? So-hee frowned. But how? We're so different. You now thought about it. Yes, they were different, in age, occupation, lifestyle. What did they have in common? Money, she said suddenly. Each of us had savings. So-hee, you had a successful business. Mi-ra, you're a nurse with a steady income. I'm a lawyer with a good salary. He targeted women who had money. And who were lonely, Mi-ra added softly. I'd never been married before him. All my friends had families already, and I was just working. Min Su saw that, and used my longing for a family. The same with So-hee, Yuna nodded. He found our weaknesses and struck exactly where it hurt most. A heavy silence fell. Each of them realized just how skillfully they had been manipulated. But why did he leave those documents behind? So he asked suddenly. The passport, the marriage certificates, why? He must have known you could find us through them. You now frowned. It was indeed strange. A seasoned con artist should have destroyed all evidence, not left it in a box. Maybe it was a mistake? Mi-ra suggested. He was in a hurry and forgot? Or Yuna's brow furrowed. Or he wanted me to find them. But why? There was no answer. But Yuna felt it, this was important. The key to understanding what was really going on. In any case, she said decisively, we need to act together. Mi-ra, when are you due? In 4 weeks, if everything goes according to plan. Good. We still have time. So-hee, can you take some days off work? I'll try to get at least a few days. Perfect. Let's meet in Seoul the day after tomorrow. I'll ask some friends in the police to pull up everything they have on Min Su. His criminal past might give us a lead. They exchanged phone numbers and addresses. When they said goodbye at the station, you now hugged each of the women. We'll get through this, she said. Together we're stronger than he is. Mi-ra nodded, wiping her tears. So he simply squeezed her hand tightly. On the train back to Seoul, you now stared out at the darkening sky. Inside her, a cold fire was burning, not hysterical, but focused. Min Su thought he could destroy their lives and walk away unpunished. But he was wrong. Because now he didn't have one deceived wife, he had 3. And they weren't going to give up. Monday began with a phone call to the police station where Yuna had filed her report. The detective in charge, Officer Hwang Jae-yeon, was a young man in his 30s who clearly lacked enthusiasm. Mrs. Hwang, I understand your concern, he said wearily, but we get dozens of these cases every month. Con artists disappear, then show up in another city under a new name. Your husband is probably long gone. I have new information, Yuna said firmly. He didn't just scam me. There are at least 2 other women with the same story. And he has a criminal record, 2 convictions for fraud. That caught Huang's attention. A serial fraudster? That changes things. Send me everything you've got. Yu now forwarded him the copies of the documents and the contact information for So-hee and Mi-ra. But she knew the police would move slowly with bureaucracy, procedures, endless paperwork. She would have to find Min-soo herself. After work, she met So-hee at a small cafe in downtown Seoul. So-hee had come from Incheon. She looked exhausted but determined. I brought something, So-hee said, pulling an old smartphone from her bag. It's the phone Min-soo used when we were together. He left it behind when he walked out. I guess he thought it wasn't worth keeping. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Yu now took the phone. It was turned off. Do you remember the password? Yes. I knew it. We didn't hide things from each other. Or at least, I thought we didn't. So he powered it on and entered the code. The screen lit up. They spent the next hour going through the phone's contents. Most contacts had been deleted, but a few numbers remained in the call log. Yu now wrote them all down. In the photo gallery, there were several pictures, So-hee and Min-soo by the sea, in a restaurant, walking down a street. Min-soo was smiling in every photo, his arm around her shoulders. He looked like the perfect husband. The perfect mask. This is strange, Yu now murmured, zooming in on one of the photos. In the background, behind Min-soo, was a restaurant sign, Golden Dragon, and beneath it, in small letters, an address, Majak Street, Tabon District, Seoul. I remember that place, said So-hee. We had dinner there on Min-soo's birthday. He said it was his favorite restaurant. Yu now quickly searched the address. The restaurant was still open. Maybe the owner or the staff remember him, she suggested. It's worth checking. The next day, Tuesday, Yu now took a day off work and went to Majak Street. So he couldn't join her. She had a shift at the supermarket, but Yu now wasn't deterred. The Golden Dragon turned out to be a small family-run restaurant with a traditional Korean interior. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged woman with a kind face. Welcome, she greeted. Table for one? Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Yu now pulled out a printed photo of Min-soo. Do you know this man? He was here about a year ago. The woman squinted at the picture. Looks familiar. Wait, let me call my husband, he's got a better memory. A man in his 50s wearing an apron came out from the kitchen. What's going on? This customer, the woman showed him the photo. Do you remember him? The man studied the photo, then nodded. Oh, sure, that's Soo. Of course I remember. He was a regular. Came in 2 or 3 times a month, always asked for the same corner table. You know his name? Yu na's heart sped up. Well, I called him Soo, and he didn't seem to mind. Nice guy, tipped well. Haven't seen him in 6 months, maybe. Did he come alone or with someone? Both. Sometimes alone, sometimes with women. 2 or 3 different ones, I think. I figured he was one of those guys who can't settle down. Yu na showed him photos of So-hee and Mi-ra on her phone. Were these women with him? The man nodded. Yes, both of them. And there was another one, younger, with light-colored hair, I think. So there was another one. A 4th? Maybe even 5th? How many victims did Min-soo have? Do you happen to remember if he ever said anything about himself, where he worked, where he lived? Not much, the man shrugged. But once he mentioned spending a lot of time in Gangnam for work. And he complained about some creditor who was after him. Said he couldn't pay him back. A creditor. That was new. Did he mention the creditor's name? No, but he cursed him plenty. Said the guy was keeping him on a leash and wouldn't let him breathe. I figured he was in money trouble and felt sorry for him. Yu na thanked the owners and stepped outside. Her mind was racing. A creditor. A debt. Maybe that was why Min Soo scammed women. He needed money to pay someone off. She called Sohee. Sohee, did Min Soo ever mention owing anyone money? No, never. He always said his finances were fine. What about loans? Did he ever take one out? Not that I know of. Although. Sohee hesitated. There was one time. A man came to our apartment looking for him. Min Soo wasn't home, and this guy started demanding to know where he was. He was aggressive, said Min Soo owed him money. I got scared and told him I didn't know anything. He left, but he gave me a business card. Do you still have it? I'm not sure. Maybe. I'll look now. 20 minutes later, so he called back. Found it. It says, Lee Tae-suk, financial consultant. There's a phone number. You now wrote it down. Thanks. I'll try calling him. But when she dialed, no one answered. The voicemail said the number was temporarily unavailable. Yuna didn't give up. She searched for information on Lee Tae-suk online. He turned out to be a private moneylender, working without an official license. The kind of man who lent cash at high interest to people the banks wouldn't touch. His office was in the old Yongsan district. The next day, Wednesday, Yuna went there. The building was shabby, paint peeling from the walls. Lee's office was on the second floor. When she entered, a man in his mid-40s with a rough face and a scar on his chin looked up from his desk, eyeing her warily. How can I help you? My name is Yuna Huang. I'm looking for information about Ryu Min Soo. I was told he owed you money. Lee's face darkened. You his relative? I'm his wife. Ex-wife, Yuna corrected herself. So you're one of the ones he conned too, Lee smirked. Have a seat. Yuna sat down on a worn-out chair across from him. How much does he owe you? 80 million won. With interest, it's already over 100 million. Yuna felt a chill run through her. That was an enormous sum. What was the debt for? Lee leaned back in his chair. 5 years ago, Ryu Min Soo came to me with a business plan. He wanted to start an import company dealing in Chinese goods. I gave him the money, using what he claimed was real estate as collateral. Turned out the documents were fake. The company went under in 6 months, and Min Soo vanished. I spent 2 years looking for him. And you found him? Yes. 2.5 years ago. He had just married some woman in Incheon. I went to his house and told him either he pays me back, or I go to the police and he ends up in prison again. He already had a fraud conviction. What did he do? He begged for time. Said he'd find the money. And then he started. Lee gave a short laugh. He started that little business of his with women. Marrying one, taking her money, leaving. Then doing it again. I knew what he was doing, but I didn't care. I just wanted my money. You now felt sick. So you forced him to scam women? I forced him to pay me back, Lee said coldly. How he did it wasn't my concern. Every time he got something, he brought me a share. In 2 years, he returned 20 million. He still owes 60, not counting the interest. Do you know where he is now? No. He stopped answering my calls 3 weeks ago. Probably decided to disappear again. But this time, I'll find him. And when I do, he'll regret it. There was menace in Lee's voice. You now stood. If you find him, let me know. He owes more than just you. He's destroyed several women's lives. That's their problem, Lee shrugged. I only care about my money. You now left the office, fury boiling inside her. So Min Soo hadn't just been a conman acting on his own, he'd been pressured into it. It didn't excuse him, but it explained a lot. She called Sohee and Mira, summoning them for an emergency meeting. They met that evening at Yuna's apartment. Mi-ra had come from Taejun. Her belly had grown noticeably larger. She moved slowly, and Yuna helped her settle onto the couch, propping pillows behind her back. "You should be resting," Yuna said with concern. "Maybe you shouldn't have come." "I have to be here," Mi-ra insisted. "This concerns me, and my baby." Yuna told them about her meeting with Lee Tae-suk. The reaction was immediate. "So that creditor forced Min-soo to scam people?" "So he exclaimed. That's a crime." "Legally, it'll be hard to prove," Yuna said, shaking her head. "Lee will claim he only demanded repayment, and that Min-soo's methods weren't his responsibility. Technically, he'd be right. But that's not fair." Mi-ra clenched her fists. "So Min-soo was a victim too?" "Not exactly," Yuna said thoughtfully. "He had a choice. He could have gone to the police, confessed his old debts, served his time. Instead, he chose to deceive women. That was his decision, and he has to answer for it. But if we find him and make him return the money, Lee will just take it," so he pointed out. "We'll be left with nothing." "Not necessarily." Yuna opened her laptop. "I looked into the records. My contact in immigration helped me. Lee Tae-suk doesn't have an official lending license. He operates illegally. And by law, if a lender isn't registered, the loan agreement is invalid. So Min-soo doesn't legally owe him anything?" So he raised an eyebrow in disbelief. "Legally, no. Of course, Lee might resort to threats or violence, but that's another criminal charge. If we prove he acted illegally and blackmailed Min-soo, we can have the debt annulled in court." "But we'll need proof," Mi-ra said. "Exactly. And we'll need Min-soo's testimony. We have to find him and convince him to testify against Lee." "You really think he'll agree?" So he asked skeptically. "After everything he's done?" "He won't have a choice," Yuna said firmly. "We'll offer him a deal. He testifies against Lee, we help him annul the debt. In return, he gives us back our money and faces the fraud charges. Prison, yes, but at least without a debt hanging over him. And if he refuses? Then we hand everything to the police, and he gets the maximum sentence plus Lee's debt. He's smart, he'll pick the lesser evil." Mi-ra nodded slowly. "Makes sense. But how do we find him?" That was the question. Min-soo had vanished 3 weeks ago and hadn't been seen since. No credit card activity, no calls, no sightings. "We have to think like him," Yuna said. "He's a professional con man, he knows how to hide. But he has weaknesses." "Like what?" asked So-hee. "Money. He just stole 35 million won from me. That money's somewhere, and sooner or later, he'll try to use it." Yuna opened her banking app. "I filed a request with the bank to trace the transferred funds. The money went to an account under a fake name. The bank has frozen it at my request, but Min-soo might have already withdrawn some in cash. So we can trace where he took the money out?" Mi-ra asked eagerly. "In theory, yes. But it'll take time, and police cooperation. And if he's smart, he withdrew it all the first day and won't touch that account again. Then there's only one option left," so he leaned forward. "We have to lure him out." "How?" "Through Lee. If Min-soo is hiding from his creditor, it means he's afraid of him. We can spread word that Lee has backed off, or that he's in trouble. Min-soo might relax and show himself. Or, Yuna added, we can make Lee help us. It's in his best interest to find Min-soo. If we tell him we have a lead, he'll start searching." "But we don't have a lead," Mi-ra objected. "Not yet. But we do have clues." Yuna spread out everything they gathered over the past few days: photos, phone numbers, addresses, places Min-soo had visited. He was a regular at a restaurant in Tabon district. That means he either lived nearby or had business there. Let's check the area, rental apartments, hotels, ghost houses. A man can't just vanish into thin air. The following days, they worked systematically, canvassing the neighborhood. So he took unpaid leave from work. Mira stayed in Seoul, renting a small room in a cheap motel, and Yuna also took time off under the pretext of family matters. They showed Min Soo's photo to hotel managers, concierges, and shop owners. Most shook their heads, but a few recognized him. "Yes, that young man rented a room in my aunt's house," said an elderly woman selling vegetables at the market. "About 3 months ago. Quiet, polite. Always paid in cash. Where's that house?" Yuna felt a surge of hope. "In the alley behind the school. But he doesn't live there anymore, he moved out in June." Still, it was something. It meant Min Soo really had been in that neighborhood, and not so long ago. They kept searching, and slowly the picture began to come together. Min Soo had rented several different rooms in different parts of Seoul, never staying too long in one place. He used fake documents and paid only in cash, leaving no trace behind. On Friday, they finally got lucky. The manager of a cheap motel in the Mapo district recognized Min Soo in the photo. "He stayed here about 2 weeks ago," the man said. "Rented a room for 3 nights. And then checked out. But he left something behind, a book. Normally we throw forgotten things away, but this one looked expensive, leather-bound and all that. I thought he might come back for it. Can we see it?" The manager brought the book, an old volume of Korean poetry. Yuna opened it and found an inscription on the flyleaf, "To Min Soo, with love, Mom. March 15, 1995. Yuna's heart tightened. So this was from his childhood. She flipped through the pages and suddenly noticed a small photograph tucked between 2 of them. It showed a boy of about 10, standing beside a young woman in front of a low house. In the background, mountains could be seen. "A family photo," whispered So-hee, peering over Yuna's shoulder. "Maybe that's the house where he grew up?" "The mountains." Mira narrowed her eyes. "That landscape looks like Gangneung. My friend's from there, I recognize it." Yuna turned the photo over. On the back, faded ink read, "Our home, 47 Haesongdong Street, Gangneung. March 1995. "We've got an address," Yuna breathed. On Saturday morning, the 3 of them took a bus to Gangneung. The trip took 3 hours. Mira was tired and complained several times about contractions, but when she called her doctor, he assured her they were just Braxton Hicks, nothing serious. "You shouldn't have come," Yuna said for the 10th time. "We could have handled this ourselves." "No," Mira shook her head stubbornly. "I have to see him with my own eyes. I have to hear why he did it." Gangneung greeted them with a cool sea breeze and the smell of salt. It was a small, provincial town with narrow streets and old houses. They found Haesongdong Street on the outskirts, in a quiet residential area. House number 47 was an old, single-story building with peeling paint and an overgrown garden. The gate creaked as Yuna pushed it open. "Looks like no one lives here," So-hee said uncertainly. But Yuna noticed fresh footprints on the path leading to the door. Someone had been here recently. She knocked. Silence. Knocked again, louder. "Min Soo!" She shouted. "I know you're here. Open the door." Nothing. Yuna walked around the house, peering through the windows. All the curtains were drawn, but in one window, the fabric shifted slightly, and she saw a faint light inside. "He's in there," she said, returning to the door. "Min Soo, if you don't open up, I'll call the police. I have evidence of your fraud, you'll get at least 5 years." For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then footsteps sounded, and the door slowly opened. Min Soo stood in the doorway. He looked much older than before, dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his face, hair unkempt. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans, barefoot. Yuna, he rasped. How did you find me? That doesn't matter. Let us in. He stepped aside, and they entered. The air inside was cold and damp. Old furniture covered in dust, stacks of boxes in the corners. It looked like he'd been sleeping on the couch, a crumpled blanket and pillow lay there. They sat at the kitchen table. Min-Soo sank into a chair opposite them, eyes downcast. This is my parents' house, he said quietly. I grew up here. After they died, no one wanted to buy it. It's been empty ever since. You told me your parents died in a car accident, Yuna said coldly. I lied. My mother died of cancer when I was 16. My father, of a heart attack 3 years later. He finally looked up, and Yuna saw pain in his eyes. I needed money for my mother's treatment. A good doctor, expensive medicine. I was young and desperate. I borrowed from Lee Tae-suk. He gave me the money, but she died anyway. And the debt stayed. So you decided to scam women to pay it off? So his voice trembled with anger. Min-Soo looked at her, his face twisting. I didn't want to. I swear I didn't. But Lee found me, threatened to send me to prison if I didn't pay him back. I tried to work honestly, but the pay was too small, and the debt kept growing with interest. Lee said, find a way to get money fast, or I'll break your legs. So you chose to destroy our lives instead of your legs? Mi-ra looked at him with contempt. Min-Soo lowered his head. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I deserve your hatred. I hate myself for what I did. Every single day. Where's our money? Yuna demanded. He stood, went into the next room, and returned with a backpack. From it, he took several bundles of cash. 30 million won. I haven't touched it. I couldn't bring myself to. It feels cursed. Yuna took the money and counted it. 30 million, 5 short of what he'd stolen on the first day. And so he's money? Mi-ra's? Gone. I gave it to Lee. I have nothing left. So he gripped the edge of the table. You gave my money, my whole life, to that loan shark? And what now? I'm supposed to forgive you. No, Min-Soo shook his head. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm just tired. Tired of running, lying, hiding. I wanted it to end. Suddenly you now understood why he had left those documents in the box. It was a cry for help. He'd wanted her to find the other victims, to bring everything to light. Because he couldn't stop himself. Min-Soo, she said, leaning toward him. You have a chance to make this right. Not completely, but partly. Lee's operating illegally. He has no lending license, and he used threats and blackmail. If you testify against him, we can get your debt annulled in court. He looked at her doubtfully. Annulled? But it's over 100 million. Legally, he has no right to collect if he acted outside the law. I'm a lawyer, I know. But you'll have to admit your crimes, too. You'll face fraud charges. Maybe 3 to 4 years, possibly suspended, if you cooperate and return the money. Return the money? But I have nothing, only these 30 million. You'll work. Pay it back gradually. It'll take years, but you'll have a chance to redeem yourself. Min-Soo sat silently for a long time, staring at the floor. Then he began to cry, quietly, hopelessly. I'm so tired of pretending. Every time I looked at you, I hated myself. You were all good people. You didn't deserve this. Mi-ra rested her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. I'm having a baby in 3 weeks, she said quietly. I have no money. You stole it from me. What am I supposed to tell this child when they grow up and ask about their father? Min-Soo looked at her belly, and his face twisted in pain. You're pregnant? With my child? Yes. He covered his face with his hands. Oh God. I didn't know. I left before you could tell me. You didn't let me tell you. You just disappeared. A long silence. I'll pay the money back, Min-soo finally said. All of it. Even if I have to work for the rest of my life, I'll pay it back. And I'll testify against Lee. At least he should face punishment. Yuna nodded. Then let's go back to Seoul. We need to make it official. The next 2 weeks were filled with meetings with lawyers, police, and court hearings. Yuna took on the role of representative for all 3 women. She drafted the lawsuit and gathered the evidence. Min-soo gave detailed testimony about his dealings with Lee Tae-suk. He told how the creditor had threatened him, forced him to deceive women, and took the money he obtained. Min-soo had kept recordings of several of their conversations, secretly made on his phone, in case he ever needed protection. Those recordings became key evidence. You could clearly hear Lee threatening Min-soo with physical harm if he didn't bring in more money. The police arrested Lee on charges of illegal money lending, extortion, and making threats. During interrogation, he tried to deny everything, but the evidence was undeniable. The trial against Lee lasted a week. Yuna served as the legal representative for Min-soo, brilliantly proving that the creditor had acted outside the law, and therefore, the loan agreement was void. The judge accepted her arguments. Min-soo's debt was annulled, and Lee Tae-suk was sentenced to 3 years in prison for extortion and illegal business activities. Meanwhile, Min-soo's own fraud case proceeded. He fully admitted his guilt, expressed remorse, and agreed to compensate all the victims. Considering his cooperation and the partial restitution of the stolen money, the judge sentenced him to 3 years of probation, mandatory community service, and scheduled repayment of the remaining debt. Min-soo was ordered to pay 500,000 won per month for the next 6 years, until he had repaid everything he'd taken. It's not a perfect outcome, Yuna told So-hee and Mi-ra after the verdict, but at least there's hope you'll get your money back. So-hee nodded. I didn't expect even this much. Thank you, Yuna. Without you, we wouldn't have achieved anything. Mi-ra hugged her. You saved our lives. Truly saved them. A week after the trial, Mi-ra gave birth, a healthy baby girl, 3 kilos 200 grams. So-hee and Yuna were at the hospital when it happened, the first to see the newborn. She's beautiful, whispered Yuna, looking at the tiny face. What will you name her? Asked So-hee. Hannah, Mi-ra smiled through tears. It means the only one. Because she's the only good thing that came out of all this. Min-soo asked for permission to visit them in the hospital. Mi-ra thought for a long time before finally agreeing. When he entered the ward with a bouquet of flowers, Yuna saw how much his face had changed. He looked older, but calmer, as if a heavy burden had finally lifted. Can I see her? He asked softly. Mi-ra nodded. Min-soo walked to the crib and froze, staring at the sleeping baby. She looks like you, he whispered. That's good. I don't want her to look like you. He nodded, accepting the words without protest. Mi-ra, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. But I want you to know, I'll pay you back first. And when Hannah grows up, if she ever wants to see me, I'll tell her the truth. All of it. Let her decide if she wants a father like me. Agreed, Mi-ra said quietly. Min-soo bent down and gently kissed the baby's forehead. Then he straightened up and walked out of the room without looking back. 6 months passed. So he returned to Incheon and got a job at a large cosmetics store. The pay was good, and she began to save little by little, dreaming of opening her own business again someday. Min-soo sent her money every month, 500,000 won, as promised. Mi-ra moved in with her parents in Daejeon. At first they received her coldly, but when they saw their granddaughter, their hearts softened. They now helped her with the baby while she worked at the hospital. Hannah was growing healthy and cheerful, and Mira felt that life was finally getting back on track. Yuna filed for divorce, and the process went quickly. Min Soo didn't contest it. She took off her wedding ring and placed it in a box at the bottom of her closet. Maybe one day she'd be able to look at it without pain, but not yet. Work helped her cope. She threw herself into new cases, winning one after another. Her colleagues admired her determination, unaware that it was fueled by an attempt to forget, to drown the ache with work. One early spring day, a colleague stopped by her office, No Jin Woo, an attorney from a neighboring department. They had met before in meetings, exchanged advice, but nothing more. Yuna, I've got a case that needs a family law specialist, he said. Could you help me out? They spent 2 hours discussing a complicated divorce involving a shared business. Jin Woo was intelligent and attentive. He listened, valued her opinion, and never argued just for the sake of it. Afterward, he invited her for coffee. Just to thank you for your help, he explained when she hesitated. At the cafe, they talked about work, life, and why they'd chosen law in the first place. Jin Woo told her he'd divorced 2 years ago, had no children, and lived alone. Sometimes I even like the solitude, he admitted with a smile. You can read all night, and no one complains about the light. Yuna laughed, for the first time in months. They started meeting more often, at first for work, then simply for lunch or dinner after hours. Jin Woo never rushed her, never pried about her past. He was just there, the calm, steady, kind. One evening, as they walked along the Han River, he took her hand. Yuna didn't pull away. It felt good, the warmth of another person's hand, the quiet knowledge that she wasn't alone. Yuna, Jin Woo said gently, I know you've been through something difficult. You don't have to tell me if you're not ready. I just want you to know, I'm not in a hurry. I can wait as long as it takes. Just give me a chance to be here for you. Yuna stopped and looked at him. His eyes held sincerity, no manipulation, no deceit. So unlike Min Soo that something inside her both tightened and eased. Thank you, she whispered. I need time. But thank you. Time passed. Yuna, so he, and Mira spoke on the phone every week, supporting one another. They had become something like a family, not by blood, but through shared pain and shared victory over it. Min Soo kept working. He'd found a job as a warehouse loader, 12-hour shifts to pay off his debt. Once a month, he sent Yuna a payment report and a short note, I'm sorry. Still working. Yuna never replied to those notes. She couldn't forgive him, didn't know if she ever would. But she could see that he was trying, and that mattered. A year after the trial, all three of them, Yuna, So-hee, and Mira, met again in Seoul. Mira brought Hannah, who had already started walking and babbling her first words. They sat in the same cafe where they'd first met, back when their investigation had only just begun. You know, said So-hee, stirring her coffee, sometimes I think, what if we hadn't found each other? I would have stayed alone with my debts, without any hope. But we did find each other, Yuna replied softly. And that changed everything. You two saved me, added Mira, rocking Hannah in her arms. I don't know how I would have managed without you. Yuna looked at the two women, so different, yet bound by the same story. They were stronger than they had ever believed. Each of them had walked through hell and come out not broken, but tempered. We saved each other, Yuna said. Because together, we were stronger than we ever were apart. Little Hannah reached out to her, and Yuna took the girl into her arms. The baby laughed, grabbing her nose with tiny, chubby fingers. She'll grow up knowing her mother's a fighter, said So-hee with a smile. And that there are people who'll always come to help. And that the mistakes of the past don't define the future, added Yuna. They raised their coffee cups in an impromptu toast. To new beginnings, said Mira. To the strength we found within ourselves, continued So-hee. To us, finished Yuna. Their cups clinked together, and in that moment, Yuna felt she could finally let the past go. Ahead lay a new life, honest, open, and full of possibilities. She didn't know what awaited her with Jean Wu, but she knew she was ready to try again. Because she had learned the most important truth: trust can be lost and regained, pain can be endured, and life always gives a second chance to those brave enough to take it. As they stepped out of the cafe, Yuna glanced at the window and saw her reflection. The same woman as a year ago, but different. There was no more naivety in her eyes, but something far more precious had taken its place, wisdom born of hardship. She smiled at her reflection and stepped forward, toward the future. Whatever it held, she knew she would handle it. Because she was no longer alone. And she was stronger than she'd ever believed. Life went on. And it was beautiful.